All right, football fans, welcome to a Whiteboard Wednesday episode here at the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Kevin Smith, bringing you our show here on the Fans First Sports Network every Wednesday. We do a scheme talk where we get into the X's and the O's of the great game of football. I'm usually joined by a guest. I'm going solo today on an interesting conversation about pre-snap motion. I think this will be a really good one. But as I woke up this morning, some breaking news. It appears it's not yet official, but all the big news breakers in the world of football, the Schefters and the Rappaports and those guys are all announcing that the Steelers are trading wide receiver George Pickens to the Dallas Cowboys. And that's extremely timely because starting tomorrow, Thursday, I'm beginning a new feature here on the show where once a week, usually at the back end of the week, I'm going to profile a different team as we sort of march towards the NFL season. And interestingly enough, the team that I have scheduled for tomorrow is the Dallas Cowboys. And I have a guest, Michael Davis. I'm actually interviewing Michael later today. So I'm hoping all the details are finalized so we can get into that conversation about the Pickens trade. But that's really timely stuff. So it'll be interesting to talk to Michael about that. What are the Cowboys doing? What are the Steelers doing? Etc. That's tomorrow. But today, on Whiteboard Wednesday, pre-snap movement. Why do teams use it at all levels of football? What are some of the benefits of motioning and shifting pre-snap movement? And what are some of the most popular or common movements that are being used in the game of football today? I think this is a great conversation because it's an interesting topic. There are two schools of thought about pre-snap movement, and in both schools, proponents of each are very passionate. You know, I've been in very passionate arguments with fellow coaches about the benefits or the detriments of pre-snap movement. And let's talk real quick though about why teams like it. I'll get to the detriments later, but why do teams like it? What are some of the benefits of shifting, motioning, changing your formation pre-snap? One of the obvious ones for quarterbacks is it helps identify coverage. When you motion, the defense needs to adjust with that motion. And one adjustment that they'll often make is they will reconfigure their secondary to compensate for the adjustment the offense has made. You go from a 2x2 to a 3x1 set. That obviously changes the structure of the offense, and it will in turn change the coverage. And if a defender runs with that motion man, that's usually a pretty good indicator that it will be man coverage. Why is he running with the motion man? Because that's his guy. That's the guy he's covering. If rather than have one defender run with the motion, you instead see the defense shift several bodies around, reconfigure the structure of their secondary or bump their linebackers, that's usually an indication it's zone coverage. They're not running a man with your man. They're instead adjusting the numbers as a whole. Another benefit of pre-snap movement is you force defenses to check out of one thing and into something else. They have to think. And anytime that you're causing them to think right before the snap, you have the potential to slow them down. You've heard me say this before on this podcast in many forums, but one of the adages of football is that a slow mind often equals slow feet. The more you have to think as a football player, the less you're going to just be reacting. You tend to play slower because your brain is cluttered. And when you are, as an offense, shifting and motioning and moving around pre-snap, that's forcing adjustments from the defense, and they have to think about exactly how they're going to reconfigure and what responsibilities they have. If you go again, we'll use 2x2 to 3x1 as an example. But if you go from 2x2 to 3x1, the defense will undoubtedly now have a trips check that they will need to get into. Almost all defenses treat 3x1 or unbalanced differently than they treat balance sets. So they now have to get into their check. And the good defenses will do this seamlessly, but you can obviously come up against ones that aren't real sure about what their adjustment's going to be and will occasionally blow a coverage or get misaligned. Another thing that you can do as an offense, you can use these shifts and motions to force the defense to reconfigure their run fits. You can create new gaps that a defense has to account for. In a typical offensive formation, I'm going back to 11 personnel, 2x2 set. You could use any example you want, but I'll stay with this one. 11 personnel, 2x2 set. You've got 6 blockers in the box, and that equals 7 gaps that the offense or the defense, I should say, has to account for. They have to account for 7 run gaps. That ball can hit in 7 gaps from the left edge to the right edge. If you add a blocker via motion or via a shift to the box, it creates an extra gap. And now the defense has to make sure that they know what defender is responsible for the new gap you've just created. And if they don't account for that gap, you've now created a +1 advantage in the box. You've got an extra blocker or an extra gap into which you can run the football. So making defenses adjust and become accountable in the run game is just as important as doing it in the passing game. And I mentioned a numbers advantage. That's another advantage you can gain by using shifts and motions smartly. You can create a numbers advantage or a leverage advantage. Again, if the defense doesn't adjust accordingly, you can out leverage them. One of our favorite shifts last year at Ocean City High School was we like to run duo. That was one of our favorite run plays, which is kind of think of it like power without the pullers. It's like sort of a gap scheme where everybody's blocking down on the front side. The ball stays on the front side, but you don't have any pullers. And it's a really good scheme if you can create a leverage advantage. So we would get into a bunch set on one side of the formation, and we would flip the entire bunch to the other side of the formation and force a defense to kick its front over or somehow add defenders to account for all those new blockers we've just added to the right side of the formation. Pre-snap on the right side of the formation, you may have just had a guard and a tackle. And now we shift the entire bunch over, and now you've got a guard, a tackle, and 3 other blockers. We just created 3 new gaps on that side of the football, and you have to account for that. So you can create a lot of advantages by using shifts and motions. However, there are disadvantages, and this is where you get into this debate amongst coaches about is it a positive or is it a negative? One thing you have to do as an offense, if you're going to shift in motion a lot, then you need to prepare the linemen for the changes that the defense is going to make. It's going to change the defensive structure. The defense starts moving bodies around, and now you can create confusion within your own blocking scheme. You get up to the ball, you get set, you identify your point man or however you do it. You make your calls, you're running a zone scheme, you got your covered, uncovered rule, whatever it is, man, however you're blocking this thing. And now you shift in motion, and now the front kicks over a gap in the direction of the shift, and all your blockers now have to reassess the count or reassess their responsibilities. And if you don't drill that really well, then you're creating problems for yourself. So you can't just shift in motion for the sake of shifting and motioning. You can't just throw it in there because you think, hey, we're going to confuse the defense with this. Because if you don't prepare for it adequately yourself, you're only confusing your own blockers. You also have to really, really rep the timing of shifts and motions. The timing is important. If you want to create a suddenness, like wing T teams do when they take their wing back or their tight slot and they motion him very, very quickly towards the line of scrimmage or backwards right before the snap. You got to time that stuff. You have to rep that stuff over and over and over and over again. You have to build in shift and motion periods into your practices so that the timing is precise. This can't be a light investment. If you're going to be a big shift and motion team, then you have to prepare for it as a core scheme, not as an afterthought, not as, some sort of window dressing. So there are pros and cons. Some offensive coordinators would much rather prefer to line up in static sets, get up to the ball, get set. Let me identify the defense. Let me see what they're in. And now I'll have a much better idea what to run, as opposed to let me start moving around pre-snap. And then I have to guess what the adjustments are going to be and then where I want to attack as a result. Okay. What are some of the most common motions we're seeing in the game of football today? I'll talk about 4 of them real quick and what some of the advantages might be. I think everybody's familiar with jet motion. That is one of the most popular motions used at every level of football. We use jet motion with my son's JV middle school team, right? We're using jet motion with 5th and 6th graders. Because why? What does jet motion allow you to do? Well, first of all, what is it? I think most listeners recognize it. Jet motion is when you take a receiver or a detached player in the formation and you motion him at full speed towards the football, generally snapping the ball right about the time he reaches the offensive tackle. And the idea is to create an urgency in the defense to account for a player moving full speed at the snap and threatening the opposite edge. The most common play, of course, paired with jet motion is jet sweep, where that receiver is now, again, moving full speed towards the football when it's snapped. So you can now catch it and very quickly hand him the ball and have him hit the edge going full speed. And oftentimes teams will use some kind of heavy formation to the side of the jet in order to create an extra blocker in there. And if the defense doesn't account for the numbers or they don't set a hard edge, then you've gained the advantage now, of course, of getting that back onto the perimeter suddenly. And that back is usually an athlete who has home run potential. There's been a lot of alternatives, for lack of a better term, built now into jet motion. It's not just jet sweep. Teams are pairing it with power read, where you have the jet man coming now full speed towards the formation, the quarterback in shotgun catching the snap and now sliding a step to the play side with the motion and reading the unblocked edge defender and making a decision based upon that edge defender's movement as to whether or not he's going to hand the ball to the jet man and attack the perimeter, or if he's going to pull it out and attack downhill on a quarterback power run with a backside guard pulling around to pick up the front side linebacker. Read the unblocked edge defender. If he widens with the jet, QB will now pull that out and run power read. Power read, when done well, is a devastating football play. Bash off of jet motions become really popular. Bash, which stands for back away, is a counter play. Now you got your counter action going to the backside away from the jet motion. And the quarterback will do the same thing. He'll read the unblocked defensive end to the play side. But if that unblocked defensive end widens with the motion, he's now pulling the ball out and running counter back away. You'll see teams run like GT bash, where the front side guard and tackle will pull and run counter back away. Why do you do that? You run bash against defenses that rotate heavily, particularly with their linebackers and secondary, to the jet motion. So if they're overcompensating in their rotation to the jet, run bash. Have the QB potentially pull that thing and go backside. So there's lots of different uses for jet motion. Sometimes you see NFL teams in particular use it from under center, and they'll zone to one side and jet and just not even block that backside end. If that backside end is a guy that closes hard on the zone action, they'll the speed at which they can now snap the ball from under center and hand it to the jet man. I mean, it hits so fast. So lots of uses for jet motion. Another motion you see a lot of, trade. That's more of a pre-snap, more of a shift than it is a motion. And I mentioned it earlier where I talked about how we would trade our bunch from one side to the next. But there's a lot of motions and pre-snap movements where you're taking a blocker and moving him from one side of the formation before the snap. Sometimes he resets, sometimes it's fluid. Difference between a shift and a motion. Motions are fluid. Shifts occur when a player resets before the snap. Trading wingbacks, trading tight ends. Tight end gets up to the line of scrimmage, doesn't put his hand down, can't put his hand down and then pick it back up and move. But tight end will come up, get himself into a 2-point stance. Why do you want to trade him? Because the defense has now set their front. Defense sets their front to the strength. Let's say they've got a stud 3-tech. They got a dude at 3-tech, and he's going to travel. They're going to set the 3-tech to the strength. So now I bring my tight end up to the ball. I get him, put his elbows on his knees in a 2-point stance. They set their stud 3-tech to the tight end side. Now I trade that tight end back over to the other side of the formation. And there's my strength. And now I'm going to run away from their stud 3-tech. Maybe it's their linebacker, their stud backer, their Sam backer who's traveling and with the strength, and I want to trade away from him. As I mentioned in my bunch example, you can trade multiple receivers. You can get into a tight end wing set and trade both of those guys. And now you've created 2 extra blockers on the front side. Or even with the bunch example, 3 extra blockers. One of the great things about using trade is because a lot of times it's run heavy. Hey, I'm going to trade my tight end and wing over to the other side, and then I'm going to run the ball there. I'm going to run duo there. I'm going to run sweep there, power, whatever. That then creates great play action opportunities. Because defenses, you trade that strength, and they immediately now adjust and they start to think, hey, why'd they trade those guys over here? Because that's where they want to run the football. You're under center, you trade your tight end wing, you run duo to the side you just traded to, and now you come back and you do it again, and you run boot action. And you take that tight end wing and you trade them from the right to the left, and now off of the boot action, they run routes back to the side where they originally aligned. One of our favorite concepts is to go tight end wing, trade it to the other side, boot back, have the tight end run the low cross, and then the wing run what we call the submarine route, which is where he's coming back under the formation. You can't really see him as a defense because he's literally coming behind all the blockers, and then he sort of squirts out there on the other side. And that's been an effective route for us because that defensive end closes and you run right by him. You don't kick him. Turns out on the other side, QB dumps him the ball in the flat. Tough to account for that guy if you're the defense. Trades, very common. Similar to trades, but using a different player, you get plus motion. We're seeing a lot of. And teams call these things all different terms. Plus motion is where you'll get a wide receiver who will align outside, and he'll now come down into the box to create that +1 and become an extra blocker. This was a hot trend in the NFL last year. You saw a lot of NFL teams use this last season where they would get into a spread set. Like, let's say they're in 10 or 11 personnel. They're trying to spread the field. They got 3 or even 4 wide receivers on the field. They're creating a light box by doing that, but they still want to be able to run their zone game. So let's say you're in a 2x2 formation, spreading the field. You get a 5-man box from the defense, and now you want to run zone right. You'll take your slot receiver and you'll motion him like he's going to go all the way across the formation. Not jet motion. He's not going fast. He's in controlled motion. But now you're going to snap the ball just as he passes the center and run your zone scheme to the right and have him just kick the backside edge. And you're now running inside zone. And I know people might hear that and go, well, that's a bad matchup. That's a mismatch. You're a slot receiver on kicking a backside edge defender. Yeah, but that kick block, it's not like an old school fullback running power where he's got to dig that guy out. This is the backside of zone. And what are you really trying to do? You're trying to shield block that end. Get in his way. Don't let him beat you across your face. Just don't let him drive you down into the damn A gap and take away the backside cut. But if you can get in his way and the back's got the opportunity now to sort of pick which A gap he wants to hit or wind it even into backside B, and because the defense is in a light box, you got the opportunity to hang on your double team for a little bit longer and push that defensive lineman up to the backer level. This can be a nice scheme. And we saw teams use this on zone. We even saw them use it on power. There were some teams who had bigger bodies, or even if they lined up an H-back out in the slot, they wanted to get into their light box that way and now bring that H-back down and kick the backside end or even the front side end and run power. We saw some of that as well. So creative ways now for offenses to lighten the box and then add a blocker just before the snap. That plus motion. And then the really hot trend, we'll end with this. The really hot trend, exit motion, where you're taking a back and you're motioning him away from the ball. Teams have been doing it for years with running backs. They'll get in the shotgun, they'll line up a running back next to the QB, and then just before the snap, they'll motion him out of the backfield away from the ball and throw him little swing screens out there and things like that. But teams are now doing it with wide receivers. They'll get into a detached bunch set, and they'll take the widest guy in that bunch, and they'll motion him towards the sideline just before the ball is snapped, and then run some kind of route combination. What's that great for? Widening the corner. You get into a 3-by-1 set. You take the inside receiver, the guy that lined up most closely to the football in that bunch. Maybe he's your quickest guy. The Dolphins would do it with Tyreek Hill. You motion him out towards the sideline. The corner has to widen to account for him. Corner can't get beat up the sideline, vertically up the sideline. So he's got to widen. Now you get everybody else, those other two guys that remain inside, they'll run some kind of clear out routes where they're crossing the field. Tyreek Hill will stem towards the sideline, get the corner to widen further, and now break back across his face. You've created a ton of space for him out on the perimeter and out leverage the corner back to the inside. And it creates great opportunities now to throw the football into those voided areas in the hook seam, those dig routes, etc. Great uses of pre-snap movement all throughout all levels of football right now. And we're seeing it as part of this continuing cat and mouse game, this X and O game between offensive and defensive coordinators. Fascinating stuff. All right, that's our Whiteboard Wednesday episode here at the Call Sheet Daily. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, join me tomorrow where my guest will be Michael Davis, Fans First Sports Network contributor here who covers the Dallas Cowboys. And that is a very timely interview that I actually set it up yesterday before this George Pickens to the Cowboys news broke. Michael and I are going to talk all about that and also about the state of the Cowboys. It's the first installment of a series I will be doing weekly now, covering a different NFL team each week as we march towards the 2025 NFL season. Hope you'll join me for that. Until then, have a great day, everybody.